I feel very fortunate to be coming live to you from the room underneath the garage, um, which we haven't used before, but now is a wonderful way to isolate. So thank you for joining me by Zoom. I could have just asked someone else to do the service, but the Serenity Shabbat service is special to me. And even though I know Meg could have pulled it off beautifully and others, I just when we have a Serenity Shabbat, whether it's a Saturday morning or a Friday night, I'd like to be personally involved because I feel that we're although all of us are connected to addiction and recovery, both within parts of ourselves, also within parts of our families and our communities. So we're all connected. Nevertheless, I feel particularly connected because of my background and my present. I mean, they're all unfolded within each other. So it's meaningful to me and I want to participate in it. So thank you for allowing us to be virtual only, since I wouldn't be allowed to come to the synagogue, and doing this from our basement room. So thank you. We're just gonna have a few additional themes to the normal service. A Serenity Shabbat. All Shabbats are about serenity. That's why we say Shabbat Shalom, right? But just a few additional welcomes to the angels that are part of the Shabbat path. For those who are in any way connected personally, or like I said, through the extensions that we have in the world of family and friends, coworkers, being a parent or a grandparent, being the child or a grandchild, a cousin, brother or sister, to those who have traveled the hard road of addiction or are still traveling it and are looking for a shalom on Shabbat. And that we want to be just mindful of, in a way, of little things like not saying the wrong thing and having an additional sensitivity, because that sensitivity enriches us. It makes us understand the shalom of Shabbat all the more poignantly and all the more connected to God. We have so much to learn from those in recovery and those who have guided the path for those in recovery, because we're really, I would say, in much, I guess is it wrong to say much the same business, but we're really on the same path. And so with your permission, I will start the service. We're going to start on page 14, and I'm going to try to see whether I have the technical wizardry anymore to occasionally share a slide. And so let me just see what this looks like. Okay, good. So let me see if this works. And you'll tell me. I know you will. So we're going to start with Yedid Nefesh on page 14. And before we do Yedid Nefesh, I've just shared a little bit of the meaning of Yedid Nefesh, that our connection to God is not only in the experience of exaltation, of finding our way beyond what is in front of us to what is beyond, but it's simply in the experience of walking and breathing. So as we start with Yedid Nefesh, we remember that in a way, like rather than see our connection to God as something uniquely ours, like I have to find the path that no one else has found or only a few have found. Rather, we emulate the deer. We emulate the simple deer who is always connected to God, doesn't even have to know that they're connected to God, but is in every moment just breathing and walking and at one with everything around us. And that's not the experience of exaltation. I'm not saying, oh my God, I have the extremely special feeling of being connected to nature. It's not that. That's exaltation. It's the experience of, I am always a part of nature. There's nothing I need to do to be connected to God. There's nothing I need to do to be connected to my higher power, except to acknowledge that I already am and to watch that there's a path before us. So in the first verse, when we say Yedid Nefesh, there's a soul, there's a friend inside of us, our soul, and it is connected to wanting to be avdach el ritzonach, a servant to its will, a servant to God's will, a servant to its will. And yarutz avdacha, your servant will run, kamo ayal, just like a deer. And then yishtachavel emul hadarach. And then this is the weird image of a deer, that the deer is prostrating, is bowing before the path. So it's like there's nothing we have to do to be connected to God. We are our soul. We're no different than a deer. We're connected in every moment. Everybody is who's walking and breathing, who's alive. Everything alive already is. But we do get the beckoning toward a path. And in a way, we have a moment here at Shabbat to say, the path is always before me. It's a path where my soul just wants to serve. And that path is in front. I bow to the path. Whether I choose to enter is up to me. And one of the things that we know about deer and mountain goats is that if you lay out a path for them away from let's say, the apples and the tomatoes, and toward another part of the field, they actually are very good at following paths. That's their gift. And so as we do Yedid Nefesh, we keep this before us. And let's sing the first and last verses. Yedid Nefesh Av harachaman mishoch avdach ritzonach yarutz avdach kimo ahaya yishtachave emul hadarach yerav lo yedidutach mi nofet suf v'chol ta'am Igaleina ufros chaviv alayet sukat shelomach ta'ir eretz mikvodach nagila v'nismecha bach maher ahuv kiva hamoed v'choneni ki me'olam yada da 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 yada da 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 yada da 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 yada da 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 yada da 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 yada da 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 yada da 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 yada da 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 yada da 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 yada da 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 yada da 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 yada da 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 da. As we go to the very next page of page 15 in the prayer book, or L'chuna Ranana, Psalm 95, we move forward to the Psalm of Gratitude and Arrival. Psalm of 95, of pilgrims arriving, pilgrims coming from all different places. Some people we know and some people we're just meeting and becoming friends with, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how people got here tonight, and it doesn't matter if they're people we know or just meeting, because we're all pilgrims at every moment. And we're never alone because of that. Because if we find other people who are also seeking, then we're not alone. I share the Hasidic teaching about gratitude, which is originally comes from Rabbi Nachman and then gets expanded by other Hasidic teachers, that there are two energies in the world that we employ to connect us to God: the energy of blessing and the energy of force. The energy of force is when we try to force a connection to God, and we're dishonest if we say we don't do this. It's not that force is bad. Force is a part of what we employ. Force is when we try to force a connection, for example, on a date, or we try to force a connection to friends, or we try to force a connection to God. And force comes from a sense of anxiety, from trying to fill a hole. And sometimes it works. Sometimes it works temporarily. We've kind of forced a friendship, or we've forced a connection with another person, or we've forced a connection to God. And it feels good because, like, when it works, we filled that hole. The anxiety gets calmer for a moment. But it's not the energy that brings a lasting connection. And in fact, often, sometimes we fall back into the dynamic of intermittent reinforcement. That because we occasionally feel the connection, we then, even when we don't feel it, we're driven to retry and retry, because intermittently the forcing works. But a relationship built out of intermittent reinforcement is not a solid connection. It's only a temporary one. So we can shift the focus from what we lack into what we already are. And then there's the energy of blessing. And the energy of blessing is involved with gratitude, the appreciation of the simple thatness in each and every moment. It's not dramatic. It doesn't feel dramatic. Blessing can be coming close to God through a simple, thank God I'm alive. Modeh ani lefanecha. Maybe if one can develop a spirituality of blessing, then a hint that I've hit the lottery, that I get to be alive in this time and place, regardless of the challenges, regardless of the past, right? Regardless of what led up to this moment, but that I get to be in this moment. That the simple enoughness of that. And blessing involves drawing near to God through connection to others. I feel connection on Shabbat, on holidays, on Yom Kippur, while hearing the shofar, because I'm not alone. In Judaism, those are things that you don't have to do alone, right? And you feel that all I had to do was to be on a journey into holy time and spaces, on a great holy pilgrimage with fellow travelers, like we are at this Psalm 95 of pilgrimage and arrival as it's served in Jewish history. I'm connected to them simply by being a Jew, by being a fellow seeker, by being a fellow human being. And because of that, I am not alone. So you are my fellow pilgrims tonight, and we're not alone. There's nothing we have to do to be more real than to just be a simple yid. And if you're not even a yid, you don't have to be a yid. You can just be a simple seeker. Be a simple person who acknowledges the pilgrimage that we're on in this particular moment, time, and place to a Shabbat with serenity. So let's, for those who know it, let's sing the top of page 15. I'm going to leave the slide out for us while we sing the beginning and end of Psalm 95. L'chu niranena l'Adonai, Nariha litzor yishenu, Nikadma fanav betoda, Bizmirot Narialo. You all know what I say before the final three lines. The final three lines, the psalmist says, you're going to scare off that sense of gratitude just for being alive, just by being just another sheep in the great flock. If you find the world falling short, if you find yourself falling short. So if you're trying to force things because you feel that there's something missing, right? That is what God is warning us against in the final three lines of the psalm, where God interrupts and says, stop. You say you're grateful, but your ancestors hardened their hearts, even when they were with me directly in the wilderness, having experienced every miracle along the way. And yet they were wayward. And in indignation, I vowed because of their complaining and their finding them and me and the life falling short. I warned that they themselves are scaring away the great land, the great promised land of peace, of shalom. So let's not find any place in us for Shabbat that is a hole that needs to be filled, because there are no holes for Shabbat. Here we go. Arba'im shana akut bedor, v'homar am to'e levavhem, v'hem lo yadu dirachai, asher nishbati v'yapi, im yavon el menuchati. And that takes us forward to the Psalms of journeys and storms. So the rest of the Psalms of Kabbalat Shabbat are about trying to feel like all of creation feels, which is connected already to God, already hearing the music that is around them, and expecting nothing more than to be able to join in a simple way, to kind of feel a sense of praise for what is, with nothing dramatic about it. And yet, the Psalms say, and I'm not going to read them, each of them, instead, I'd like to share this, which is that, but we don't feel it. Because as the Psalms of Kabbalat Shabbat tell us, it says that the injustice and other aspects of my life cloud my sense of God, from my senses. And God's throne seems behind a cloud, but God's voice comes from within that cloud. It's a cloud of the rivers rising and raging, the cloud of storms, the cloud of injustice, the cloud of not feeling love, the cloud of lack. And so first we acknowledge that storm. And I'm just sharing this one slide. It's just one of I mean, I would imagine that if we were in a situation where we could all share with full trust, and trust is built, it's just not bestowed in a moment, we would all have stories as parents and children, as siblings, in our own lives, of where we've had the storm of addiction come into our lives. And so here we go, just one. I'm a Jewish wife, a mother, and a grandmother. I'm a retired teacher and an alcoholic in recovery with 30 years of sobriety. I used to think I couldn't really be an alcoholic because I wasn't a Skid Row bum. I didn't have DUIs. I never went to work drunk, and I never drank on the job, and I didn't lose my family, and I didn't lose my job or my life. But I did suffer, and so did my family. I have learned that alcoholics come in all sizes, shapes, and backgrounds. I've been through the very worst and the very best things in my life during my sobriety. I've learned how to live life on life's terms, a day at a time. The storm of addiction is not just something that those in the movies experience, or those who are not normal Shabbos Jews. So I'm going to put us back on. All right. Addiction is not just about like, well, we're all the coping. And the Jews, things look good when you show up to service. The rabbi forgot to put on a tie today, but we look our Shabbos best. And then there are the people who are not here, and they're the ones with the problems, and that's not true. I don't fall into that category, because I certainly am an addict, and I'm certainly a family member of addicts, and I'm certainly a family friend of addicts, and I'm a friend who's lost friends who are addicts. And so we come in all looks. We come in looks of being absolutely successful and absolutely fine to the outside world and absolutely perfect Shabbos Jews. But the addictions, when we're being honest in our relationship with God, they come at a cost, not only to ourselves, but to our families and our loved ones. And so we Shabbos Jews are they. And that's why I appreciate what we just read, which is just one person sharing their story. But we could all share our stories because we are all they. I'm going to share one more at this time. I'm going to read it because it's probably very little on your screen, especially if you're on a phone. Another storm. I'm retired from the aerospace industry. I'm a military veteran. I was married for 40 years until my wife passed away in 2009. I'm the father of 2 children. I was the grandfather of 1 grandchild who drowned in 2015, and I'm very involved in my synagogue. My first drinking experience was in high school and resulted in a blackout. I struggled with alcoholic drinking for years after. I drank and drove, received a ticket for reckless driving, and was arrested after being in an accident that occurred because I was inebriated. I finally went to an AA meeting and for 6 years attended meetings off and on while my drinking got worse. My wife eventually left with our children. A few months later, I went back to AA and I took it seriously. I went to meetings every day, found a sponsor, and worked the program. My wife came back when I was 9 months sober, and our marriage blossomed. I'm still very active in AA and have 37 years of sobriety. Helping other alcoholics is a big part how I practice tikkun olam. As we get to the end of the Shabbat Psalms, you know that the last one is, though the waters may rise in rage, though the rivers may pound and pulsate, I know that God is still there. Right? And there are two storm psalms about that. And through these storms, when we acknowledge them, it doesn't mean that God is not there. It just means that we have to follow the path of our higher power, because our higher power was always there, and connect to it. And this is just something I wrote, and I hope it's not awful. Our connection to our higher power is not only possible, it is immediate and always available. We are enough for God when we turn to our higher power and we trust in it and in ourselves. We learn that we can be enough for others when we can only be enough for others when we are totally honest. For being honest with others is being honest with ourselves, and there is no in between there. And that making atonement and attempting to make amends, they are always and in every moment a path God sets before us with an invitation. We learn that there is no shame in our cravings. There are no shame in our cravings for love, cravings for connection, and there's no shame in even for trying to force it at times, for that is human. But we learn that completeness and shalom will not come from a substance, even if it feels that way at first. It's tainted. It is idolatry. It is searching for the connection and believing a false promise of its being found. And so that takes us to Lachadodi on page 21. We'll do the first and last verses, and we'll welcome in the spirit of Shabbat to our service. Page 21. Lechadodi likra kala pene Shabbat nekabela shamor v'zachor dibor echad hishmianu el hamyuchad Adonai echad u'shemo echad l'shem ol tiferet ve'litila lechadodi likra kala pene Shabbat nekabela Likrat Shabbat lechuvenecha ki mekor habracha merosh mikedem nesucha sof maaseh b'machshava techila lechadodi likra kahala pene Shabbat nekabela mikdash melech Ir melucha kumitzei mitocha hafecha harav lach shevet be'ehem mekabacha v'hu yachamol alayichem la lechadodi likra kahala pene Shabbat nekabela. Page 22. Yamin usmaol tifrot ziviet Adonai tahariti al yadish vehen parti v'nismecha v'henagila lechadodi likra kahala pene Shabbat nekabela boi v'shalom atere bahala gam b'simcha uvetzahla toch emune aham segula bo ichala lechadodi likra kahala pene Shabbat nekabela. Welcome to the spirit of Shabbat. Welcome to our higher power to join us and to make us complete. We are on page 23 for the Shabbat Psalm. I'm sorry I don't have the girls here davening, but anyway, that's what isolation does. Mizmor shir, shir liyom hashabbat. Mizmor shir, shir liyom hashabbat. Tov lehodot la'Adonai, ulezamer l'shimcha elyon, lehagid ba'boker chastecha, v'emunatcha ba'leilot. Mizmor shir, shir liyom hashabbat. Mizmor shir, shir liyom hashabbat. It says that we praise Shabbat to the music of the lute and the melody of the harp. And as we said earlier in the Psalms, we pick up our instrument, whether it's our voice or our guitar or our cymbal or whatever we have around us, and we make a joyful noise and join in with the sound of creation that's already. And I'm fortunate enough to, I'm in isolation by the garage where we have the sound of birds and crickets and rustling in the leaves. And so may we join in joyfully in that music. As we get to the bottom of the psalm, it says, as you know, that those who connect with what is coming in from the roots, like trees, those who are drawing and have drawn from the depths, the roots in tradition, the roots in the soil, they shall be ever fresh and fragrant, and there will always be new growth on their older limbs, on their older boughs. And one of the anecdotes of storms I was going to share, I just didn't, but I'll share briefly now. It was, from a guy, Jewish guy, who was saying, look, I was basically using substances to drive my creativity as a musician. And I thought that I could only really create and be creative musically and join in with the song of creation if I was using. But then after 20 years of using, I realized it wasn't, I was nowhere, is what he says. I was just nowhere. I was nowhere creatively, and I was nowhere musically, and I was nowhere in my life. And I think of the psalm saying that that if you can just dig deep into the roots of what's already there, just already what's in every breath, what's already around us, without having to feel like one has to do something different or try, and just let the depths produce, then there is always no new growth to be had. And that I worry that part of what drives people like him, and I think many of us, is that we won't be creative unless we use. And I feel like this psalm is like a love song from God to us, to say that never, ever, 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 ever believe that for a second, because you don't have to do anything to have the beautiful growth grow on your boughs. And it doesn't even matter about your age. Like, you'll never, never be washed up, because if you have roots in the right soil, if you're drawing on your higher power, you're just missing the creation that's already happening. You have to believe in just that. And so I love the Shabbat Psalm. Odunuvum b'seva, d'shenim v'ranenim yihu, v'yagi ki ashar Adonai, suri v'lo avlahata bo. And finally, page 24, the end of the Kabbalat Shabbat service. Adonai, you reign robed in strength. You set the earth on a sure foundation. The world stands firm. Your kingdom stands from earliest time. You have always existed. In my life, the rivers may rise in rage, and the waters may pound and pulsate, and the floods may swirl and storm. But of the crashing of the sea and its mighty waves, you are still there. Your decrees never fail, and holiness befits your house for eternity. Odunuvum b'sev, eidotecha nemnu ma'od, levecha nava kodesh Adonai, ba'orech yamim. Before the first mourner's Kaddish, I'm going to read the Yortzites for this week. Beth Israel Congregation remembers, among others, on this Shabbat, Roz Ashley, Sarah Alvin, Robert Brickman, Lillian Cohen, Wilbur Cohen, Albert Daniels, William Dickerman, Leon Feig, Lillian Feinberg, Samuel Saligans, Anna Geffen, Rosalind Greenberg, Mark King, Lucy Lemberskaya, Meyer Levy, Annette Lieberson, Morris Jacob Lauren, Sarah Lowe, Arnold Ludemer, Henrietta Ludemer, Charlotte Miller, Lorraine Nadelman, Milton Perlstein, Rose Pickman, Alan Pollins, Oscar Rothaus, Rose Sankari, David Edward Schaefer, Ann Schleger, Joseph Sellen, Max Stryer, Selma Sussman, Harry Williams, and Ruth Winnick, as we continue to remember Elaine Stoller, Natalie Scher, Suzanne Feingold Schultz, Judith Cashton, Lorraine Sherman, Michael Adams, Leona Leon, Phyllis Werbel, Fanchen Lessing, Carol Feinerman, David Fallman, Bruce Thal, Carol Amster, Gary Joseph Ullman, Paul Ernest Phillips, Leslie Garber Matthews, Alan Fisherman, Raisa Levinskaya, Alice Cohen, Toby Barben Rothaus, and Vivian Perlstein. I invite all of those who are saying the Kaddish to recite with me on page 24. And if you've ever had a relative or a friend who has died, either directly because of addiction or indirectly because of addiction, I hope you'll also be saying the Kaddish tonight. Yit Gadal v'Yit Kadash Shemei Rabbah V'Alma Divra Pirute V'Amlich Malchute V'Chayechon Uvyomechon Uv'Chaye Dechol Beit Yisrael V'Agala Uvizman Kari V'Imru Amen. Yehe Shmei Rabbah Mevarach Le'olam Ulamei Amaya Yibarach V'Yishtabach V'Yipa'ar V'Yitromam V'Yitnaseh V'Yithadar V'Yitaleh V'Yitalal Shemei D'Kodesha Richu Le'ela Min Kol Birchata V'Shirata Tushbechata V'Nechemata Da'amiran B'Alma V'Imru Amen. Yehe Shlama Rabba Min Shemaya V'Chaim Aleinu V'Al Kol Yisrael V'Imru Amen. Aseh Shalom B'Mromav Hu Ya'aseh Shalom Aleinu V'Al Kol Yisrael V'Imru
Amen.
Amen. I wish I could bring them all back so they could be with us for the Shabbat. I'm going to light the candles next to me, and as I light the candles, I hope you'll join me in inviting in everyone who needs the light of God on them, who could use increased connection to their higher power to get away from addiction. And I invite in the souls I've just said Kaddish for to share a little bit of Shabbat spirit with me and with us. By the way, I hope you'll forgive me. It is not an absolute requirement to stand in davening except for the Amidah, and I'm just a little too weak to stand today. But it's not a sign of disrespect or that I'm not standing in spirit. Wow. Third one's the charm, I hope. I know. I guess I forgot how to do this. Third one's the charm. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam Asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lahadlik ner shel Shabbat. Amen. Since I don't have the family to share the priestly blessing with, I'll share it with everyone else, which is may everyone and may everyone who has an addiction to anything, may they experience the grace of God's blessing. May they be blessed by God and guarded. May God's light shine upon them and bring them the grace to get onto the path when they need it. And Yisadonai Allah, may they never feel alone. May they always feel a sense of shalom in their heart, because even when they think they feel alone, God is right there shining God's countenance upon them. Amen. The Mariv service, which will be, I'm not going to sing all the parts tonight, so it'll be on the briefer side, is on page 28. And we start with the blessing for light and dark, mixing into this evening's dusk. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher gevara Mariv haRavim. Umavir yom umevi laila, mavdil ben yom uben laila, Adonai tzvaot shemo. El chai v'kayam, tamidim lo chalenu le'olam va'ed, Baruch atah Adonai, hama'arihi v'aravim. Page 29, Ahavat Olam. Ahavat Olam b'Yisrael. V'yavadcha tasimero l'olamim, Baruch atah Adonai, ohev amo Yisrael. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. We continue silently on 30 and 31. Adonai Elohechem Emet, Emunakos of V'kayam Aleinu. We continue the service in the middle of page 32. You may have heard me say many times before that when we sing the Micha Mocha on page 32, when we do it tomorrow as well before the Torah service, or before the Amidah in the morning service, that the rabbis viewed this as not commemorating the redemption that took place at the sea, but the reason we daven it as a prayer is to remember that we have the possibility for redemption in every moment from the demons and the constricted places that trap us, from our own places of slavery. And so that when we sing it, it is a prayer saying that I have the ability to be freed from my demons. Mi chamocha ba'elim Adonai, mi kamocha nedar ba'kodesh, Nohora tehilot hosefela, Machutecha ra'u vanecha bokeyam lifnei Moshe ze'eli, Anu v'yamru Adonai yimloch le'olam va'ed, V'ne'emar ki fada Adonai et Yaakov, v'golam chamazak mimenu, Baruch atah Adonai ga'ah Yisrael. Blessed be Adonai who redeems each of the people of Israel. On page 33, let's pray for a Sukkot Shalom over everyone who fears that Satan, the adversary of Satan, of Satan, is chasing them in their thoughts. So anyone who feels that compulsion and that dark side, may they feel tonight a protection from God over it, so they just don't feel it. And they feel protected. They feel safe in and of themselves. Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu l'shalom, v'amidenu malkeinu l'chayim, ufros aleinu sukat shalomecha, v'takneinu b'etzah tova milfanecha, v'oshi'enu l'ma'an shemecha, v'agem b'adeinu v'aser me'aleinu oyev teva v'cherev v'rav v'yagon, v'aser satan milfanenu, v'me'acharenu, v'zel kanafecha tastirenu, ki el shomrenu, Umatzilenu ata, ki el melech hanun v'rachum ata, u'shmor tzeitenu v'oinu l'chaim l'sholem ata v'yad olam, u'fros aleinu sukat shalomecha, baruch atah Adonai, haporei sukat shalom aleinu v'al kol amo Yisrael v'al kol tevel v'al Yerushalayim. Page 34, V'shamru. May we have a Shabbat rest that refreshes us. V'shamru v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat, lasot et ha-Shabbat, v'dorotam barito olam, beini uvein b'nei Yisrael oti leolam, ki sheshet yamim asa Adonai et ha-shamayim v'et ha'aretz, v'ayom hashvi'i, Shabbat vayinafash. We head now into the silent prayer before the end of the service. We're in the middle of page 34 for the Amidah. And I'll share my final thought for tonight, which is I want you to prepare for that last page, that last blessing on page 38. Oh, it's there. Probably. And here, let me. I got to find a place that's the better translation. Here we go. Do me a favor and turn to page 48. We'll start at the end, and then we'll do a silent from the beginning. On page 48, we basically end the Amidah on Shabbat with our God and God of our ancestors, find favor in our Shabbat rest, instill in us the holiness of your mitzvot, and let your Torah be our portion. Fill our lives with your goodness and gladden us with your triumph. Cleanse our hearts, so that we may serve you faithfully, lovingly and willingly. Adonai our God, grant that we inherit your holy Shabbat, so that the people of Israel who hallow your name will always find rest on this day. Praise our Adonai, who hallows, who designates this period of time for us to feel this way of Shabbat. So, for one thing, it is about Shabbat being a vehicle for cleansing our hearts to serve. And if you notice, it says lovingly and willingly. Why is willingly there? Like we're saying God, it's one thing to say God, lovingly grant us Shabbat. But why are we asking God to willingly grant us Shabbat? Like doesn't God already want to grant us Shabbat? Like it is one of the most confusing parts of the liturgy to me poetically. Why do we have to say, God, I want you to willingly, like I don't. And so for me on this Shabbat, and I think we could do a whole 50 days of the Omer reflecting on this one principle with a different idea each day. But my one idea for today is that like the way we force a connection, that I feel like substance abuse, and it's different for different people, but to me it's about forcing a connection that isn't willingly being granted. And I want to make a connection with God that is willingly coming to me, that I'm not forcing. And so I'm going to share as the theme for our Amidah the following prayer from 12 Step. And so I have to share my screen. Here it goes. Lovingly and willingly. It's the step of the decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood God. It's from one of the steps of 12 Step, the third step prayer. God, I offer myself to thee, to build with me and to do with me as thou wilt. Relieve me of the bondage of self, that I may better do thy will. Take away my difficulties, that victory over them may bear witness to those I would help of thy power, thy love, and thy way of life. And so when we willingly choose to serve God, which is exactly what the prayer is, we have to willingly serve God, not begrudgingly serve God. I will go to services if you make me. I will pray if it's my kid's bar mitzvah. Like none of that. It means choosing to serve willingly. And then God willingly, when we choose willingly to serve God, then God willingly grants us the ability to serve. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave this up. And for everyone, with the silent Amidah begins, as I said before, on page 34. I'll do the Chatzi Kaddish. You're on your own from page 35b to 38, or you can just make your Amidah today, meditating on this prayer. Yikadav yikadash meraba, yamad ivrak yurtev yamlit machute, bechayechon uvyohomechon, uvchayeducho beit Yisrael, bahagalav izman kariv, Ve'imru, Amen. Yehei Rabba mevarach, li'alam ulamei almaya, yiparach v'yishtabach, v'yipar v'yitrama v'yinaseh, v'yitadar v'yitalev v'yitalal, shmeru kudesha brichu, le'ela min kol berchata v'shirata, tushbechata v'nechemata, damihiram b'yama, v'imru. Amen. Silent prayer. For those who are still davening, you're welcome to mute us until you're finished. And for the rest of us, we're on page 51 for Aleinu. Aleinu l'shabeach la'adon hakol, la'tet gedula liotzer breshit, shelo asanu kegoye haratzot, velo samanu k'mishpachot ha'adama, shelo sam chelkenu kahem v'gohor aleinu kechol hamonam, v'yanachnu korim, u'mishtachavim u'modim, lifnei melech malchei hamlachim, Hakadosh Baruch Hu Shehulat Hashemayim. Kakatu b'toratecha Adonai imloch le'olam va'ed. V'ne'emar v'haya Adonai le'melech al kol ha'aretz. Bayom hahu yiheh Adonai echad. Ushemo echad. Warner's Kaddish can be found on page 52. For those reciting the Kaddish tonight, please recite. And if you wish to recite like I am, I'm reciting tonight for the over 100,000 Americans who have died of a drug overdose in the past 12 months. Yitgadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah, v'yalma divra kirute v'yamlich malchute, v'chayechon uvyomechon uv'chayedecho beit Yisrael, v'agala v'zman kariv v'imru, Amen. Yehei shmei Rabbah mevarach le'olam olamei almaya, barach v'yishtabach v'yipa'ar v'yitromam v'yinaseh, v'yitadar v'yitalev v'yitalal, shmei kudesha brichu. Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata, tushbachata v'nechamata, da'amiran bi'ama v'imru, Amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya, v'chayim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Aseh shalom b'mromav, hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. May their memories continue to bring blessings to this world. I want to thank everyone who joined us. We're going to just finish with Oseh Shalom in a second, but I'm going to end the YouTube feed because I don't probably think you care a lot about like announcements. Maybe you do, and I'll feel bad about it. But to everyone who's been joining us by YouTube, I hope that you have, just with the prayer wishes, a total Shabbat rest. And for those who joined us tonight and watched this, I hope that at the beginning we say the deer bows before the path, and then at the end we do Aleinu, and we use the same word, where we bow. So may the process of the prayer hopefully lead us to better enter the path of that God is beckoning